Hey, everybody, welcome to our Orange and Brown Talk live post game show. Week two, the Browns winners in their second preseason game here, 22-13 over the Philadelphia Eagles. I am joined by Lance Reisland, as I was last week. We're going to break down everything we saw in this game. Of course, we're going to talk a ton of Dylan Gabriel. We might even get into these joint practices a little bit that we watched. Lance and I were both in Philadelphia watching those joint practices. So, we might get into those a little bit if we've got time. Probably going to be here till about 5 o'clock ish, something like that. We'll see how long Lance wants to talk about the exploits of one Dylan Gabriel here after this game. But Lance, let's start here. And there's a lot of ways to go with kind of Dylan's performance and how he did in this game. But I think the word, and obviously there was the pick six, right? There was the fumbled handoff. But overall, I think the word today with Dylan was efficient. It was just really efficient. He was taking what was there. Um, there were some nice throws down the field. Not a lot of like deep balls, but I just thought he was very efficient today. He moved the offense so good on third down, especially in that first quarter. You could sort of see this is probably what the Browns envisioned when they drafted him.
Well, yeah, what I really liked was obviously he's 3 for 3 on that first series with 3 completions being on third down. But what I really liked, two things stood out to me. First of all, going back to Shador last week and Dylan this week, both kids were ready to play, and I think that's a credit to the coaching staff in terms of getting them comfortable and getting them what they can have some success with. And as they grow and as they build it with building on some of their deficiencies, they built on what they do well. And I think that's so important as a coach that you don't go, hey, this guy's short or this guy doesn't have an elite arm or whatever the criticism has been on these two guys. Kevin Stefanski and his staff, they have to be given a lot of credit, Tommy Reese, in terms of getting these kids ready to play. They seemed very, like you said, efficient. And efficiency comes with knowledge, right? And the more knowledge you have, the more poise you can play with. The more poise you play with, the slower the game becomes. And that's at any level of football. I was just highly impressed with his, like you said, I think it's a great word, efficiency, but just the poise and demeanor. And it kind of takes me back, if you're just trying to watch the game, you have to be very impressed in just both quarterbacks in terms of they knew where they were going with the football. Their fundamentals are continuously getting better after we watch them every day. And I was just impressed, like you said, just the operation, and made some good throws. Obviously made not a great throw. That was a team interception, terrible spacing. And then whatever that handoff was he too wide? Was, that I will take credit. Quarterbacks always get blamed for that, and I agree with that. But, that could have just been a miscommunication on where exactly that hole was hitting. I'll be interested to hear what they have to say to you guys in the media on that one. But again, a really solid performance. Offensive line played pretty well. But for me, the best thing was, Dan, after those big passes, Browns came right back with wide zone and counter and power and tried to reestablish. They didn't get pass happy, and they got back into what they're trying to make their identity, which I think is awesome too.
Yeah, look, I agree. It was a team interception, right? I mean, even Joe Thomas pointed it out on the broadcast. Those two receivers were just, and you were texting Mary Kay, Ashley, and I kind of what you saw. Those two receivers shouldn't have been in that spot. But that said, Dylan Gabriel's got to throw that ball away, right? Like that's an area where, again, if we're going to talk about, and the Browns are going to tell us how smart Dylan Gabriel is, how he processes things like a computer, all of that. That's got to be a lesson right there, because yes, your receivers messed up, but that ball's got to go out of bounds. That ball's got to go somewhere that's not to that defender.
Well, you got Whiteheart was in the flat. He got pushed too deep, and then you got Deontay Johnson coming over on the drag, got pushed shallow, so they're kind of together. But you said it just best. So it's 194 to 38 in the first half. And as I watched as an offensive coordinator for all those years with my father, it's frustrating, right? Because you've completely dominated both sides of the line of scrimmage up front. You've played really well. Your young quarterback has played really well, and yet you're barely winning. And that's the game of football, and that's what turnovers do to you when you dominate and you have a pick six and a fumbled, and that's where those points came from. So that's exactly right. And I like what Joe Thomas said about stop digging the hole. And my dad used to always say, don't compound an error with an error. So, right. So the receivers are wrong. The defensive did a good, just throw it away. Don't try to squeeze that in there. In the NFL, there are no, you can't squeeze things if they're not there. These guys are too talented. So obviously learning team, but that's the quarterback's responsibility. If things aren't going well, you got to get rid of the football. Same with the handoff. So those two turnovers are on him. And that kind of flawed a really good day, but that's part of it. You have to protect the football. That ball is life in football. So obviously, those are things he'll clean up moving forward as he continues to grow.
Yeah, and look, I mean, the discussion, I said it with Shedeur Sanders. I'm going to say it with Dillon Gabriel. These are preseason games, right? Like it's going to be a lot harder for both of these guys when they play in the regular season, when they're playing first team defenses for a full game, when defensive coordinators are spending their entire week game planning for every flaw, game planning for everything that they see on the tape with these two guys. So what we're seeing in August isn't going to directly translate to whenever these guys get on the field, October, November, December. It's going to be a lot harder for them. So I look, we got somebody in the comments already blaming us for turning this into some anti-Shedeur Sanders thing, and Dillon was whatever. They both played really well. It was also both in a preseason game with very little game planning against mostly backups. Now, I know Shedeur did get a couple series against Carolina starters, but I just, to me, I'm not going to overreact to either of these guys' performances, but I thought they both did a nice job. They both did what they needed to do in these football games, and obviously Dillon Gabriel did make that. Of the two, he made the costly mistake. I'm going to make our guy in the comments really mad. If Carolina would have caught a football last week, Shedeur would have had an interception or two as well. So, again, I'm just not going to overreact to either of these guys' performances. They both did what they needed to do in these first two preseason games.
Well, first thing, I thought the expectations were, even low. Like, let's have the operation. These are two talented kids who did a really nice job. And once again, one's performance doesn't really affect the others. They're trying to push and trying to do what they, some of the things they struggle with, whatever it may be, fundamentals or reading or processing, whatever it may be. They both have a long way to go. But I will say this: the thing that was very impressive by both was the preparation they had with themselves, and obviously they helped each other, and what the coaches did for them. Now, I've been asked a couple times, Dan, what does that mean? Like, it won't be the same. Well, they're going to take away right now, Kevin Stefanski, for both guys, their throws are in control, right? That 10 to 15 yard range. And you're not seeing a ton of pressures, and they're kind of scaffolding to get to where they need to be. But that's what those NFL guys do. They watch film all day, and they're going to take away easy throws. They're going to take away those layups, right? And that was my dad's thing, right? We're going to take away the layups, make you make threes. And it's the same kind of football analogy where you're going to make things harder. You're going to make the throws longer. You're going to pressure an A or B gap. Where do they not like pressure from? All these analytics. So it's just good. I think they did a great job, and I don't think it has to be one versus the other. For me, it was like, all right, I'm with you. It's like they did a really nice job for what they were giving. Both guys did a nice job of running the show, pace, tempo, getting in and out of huddle, formations, all that kind of stuff that's really hard to do for an NFL quarterback. Multiple play calls, getting into right run breeds, and all that kind of stuff. They were outstanding, and I hope they just continue to grow. And that's the kind of the process you want. You don't want to, this guy did this or this guy did it. I thought they both did an outstanding job, and they will continue to get better. And everybody will see once they get into the game situation for that to play how much different it is on Sunday afternoon during the regular season than what they're doing now.
Yeah, it's just hard to translate that. I'm going to put a comment here from our guy Nicholas on the screen, because personally, this is something I agree with based on what we've seen today. And I've said this before on this pod. Like, some of my opinions on these two guys goes back to what I thought of them in the pre-draft process, and for me, I liked Shedeur in the draft process better than I liked Dillon Gabriel. Now, for you, it was a little different. You liked Shedeur. We did a whole draft pod praising Shedeur Sanders, so I don't want to twist your thoughts on these two guys. You liked Shedeur as well, but I think that matter. They just lost here. I'm sorry about this delay here. I'm going to put this up here, but this is sort of how I kind of feel about the two guys, and I think we saw this today. As well. Okay, it keeps refreshing on me. So I'll just say it. Basically, the gist of what our guy Nicholas said was Dillon ran the offense to a T today, right? But Shedeur has more upside. That's sort of how I feel about the two guys personally. Now, is Shedeur going to hit that upside? I don't know. But I think of the two, the ceiling of the two, I think Shedeur is better. But that has nothing to do with what I saw in either of these preseason games, because, Lance, you're going to hate to hear this, I don't care about preseason games. I really don't. I don't think they predict success all that often. But that's just what I think of them. So
I
yeah, I
agree.
mean your thoughts on what I just said.
No, I agree. It's funny. It's because I, in our pre-draft, I think because you and I had talked for so long, you and I and Tim, on how much I like Dylan Gabriel. Everybody assumes that I am a anti-Shador, and if you go back to January, I actually like Shador, especially for the Browns offense, more than I like Cam Ward for the Browns scheme. And he has that it factor. So it's kind of that like wild card it factor. Maybe he has a higher ceiling, but I'm not sure because I think Dylan has a ton of talent too. But I think his size, not only his height, but just that weight taking those hits. So I kind of like to see it play out. I kind of like, people think he has more of an upside. He's got to fundamentally be more sound than Dylan, right? Because Dylan has a little bit stronger arm than Shador. People don't really believe that, but that's in my opinion, I think because of the fact that he uses his body so well. But then the processing and all that kind of stuff. But there's an it factor. Now, I would just say I think both guys did a really, really nice job, and I think that they both did a nice job of taking advantage of an opportunity. If you think about Shador last week and the pressure he was under to play well throughout the country, and then he plays well, Dylan's hurt, and then I thought Dylan did a great job of coming back today, and he responded a little bit. And I think of that as healthy competition and really pushing each other and really kind of getting better because the other guy's making plays too. And if the other guy's not making plays, maybe you're not as good. So I don't know. I thought and once again, for me, like you're saying, the preseason doesn't mean as much. For me, it's more about the coaching they got than their actual performance. I thought those coaches got those kids ready to play, and they were able to make plays because they knew what they were doing with the amount of plays they had. So for me, kudos goes to Kevin and his staff because that's hard to do to get those quarterbacks ready to play like that, and they both did a nice job.
Can I ask you this? I actually had to close the comments because I don't want this podcast to just turn into us arguing with commenters all day.
Yeah,
they're there. I'll see them eventually.
sure.
But I guess there was one person who said something interesting. I think this is kind of the issue. Like we're spending so much time on this, and we're talking about these two guys. And I think in a perfect world, if the Cleveland Browns could have their way, one of these two guys, whether it's Dylan Gabriel or Shador Sanders, would emerge as their long-term starter. Because that just knocks over so many dominoes now. Now you go into the draft and it's like, hey, we got these 2 first-round picks. We could just take like the best edge rusher and the best receiver or whatever. Like we could just take the 2 best players at those spots. We can spend our free agent money because we've got a quarterback on a rookie contract. We can spend all of our free agent money filling out this roster. If one of these 2 players emerges as a franchise quarterback, then it just makes your team building so much easier. The concern I have is we're just not going to get a long enough look at either of these guys, right? Because it's probably going to be Joe Flacco to start the season. I don't know what they're going to do with Kenny Pickett. If they feel good about these 2 rookies, it does open up a Kenny Pickett discussion. Do you trade him? I don't know. But I think I really like the guy. So I do think like they're probably going to end up drafting a quarterback next year too, because I just don't know that we're going to get a long enough look at either of these guys. So it really does just come down to what you're talking about, making sure these guys are getting coached up, making sure they're ready when they do get thrown into the fire this season to try and show you something. And then if we're being honest, make sure they're ready to come in and compete next year because you'll probably still have both of these guys on the roster. And I think we're probably in for another quarterback competition a year from now.
Well, my thing would be I'm going to take a coaching angle on this one, Dan. And I think right now, without question, and you and I are out there all the time, and you know more than me, Joe Flacco is the best quarterback right now, and it's not close. And everybody, whether you like it or not, and what I mean by that is I think he gives them the best chance to win. And winning still has to be the most important thing. It has to be the most important thing in that locker room. And I've said it before, the most overused word in the game of football in a lot of sports is culture. Culture is not what you say. Culture is what you do. And right now, the best guy right now performing the best, especially that last 2 11-on-11s that we watched in Philly, Joe Flacco gives them the best chance to win, which tells Joe Bitonio and Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward that winning is still the most important thing, not developing. Because as a coach, the more developing you do, you develop them for another coach. And I just think right now, as long as the primary goal, and I always say this, if my dad, who was the boss, said, Lance, you're playing this guy, then I listen to my dad. He was the boss. But besides that, I'm playing the best guys every week from high school, college to pro. The best guys should play. The best guys, not because I want to give them a chance, because they've earned a chance. And for me, Joe Flacco is not it's not a, oh, he's playing well because he's 40. Joe Flacco has played very well the last 11 days of camp, and it's been very impressive. And he gives them a chance to win because of his ability to stretch the ball. And once again, going back to winning should be the goal. It's not a rebuilding year. It's always retooling. You're trying to win every single game. So I think this will, like you said, him playing well today kind of hopefully kind of relaxes everybody a little bit, and understanding that for the Browns to win, it's going to be Joe Flacco, especially early on in this tough 6-game stretch.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, and that's something that I'm going to write when I put up my observations as soon as we're done here. And I don't remember if I said it already on the pod or if it was just when we were chatting beforehand, but I said to you, like, I hope that this performance from Gabriel on a day when Shador couldn't play, so it just felt like this felt like a normal preseason game, like just a normal, yeah, okay, both coaches were going through the motions at the ends of the game, all of that, like it just felt like a normal preseason game. And I hope that this just sort of quiets some of the noise around this competition a little bit. And like you said, ever since Kenny Pickett had the hamstring injury and Joe Flacco has sort of taken control of this competition, we've seen him, especially in these two practices against the Eagles, we saw him really just take ownership of being that number one quarterback. And that's really important because we are entering a week where they're going into the dress rehearsal game. They'll probably play a fair amount of their starters on Saturday against the Rams. And then you have, the week leading into Labor Day. So you have a few practices that week, but you got a cut down day. They have to give those guys that weekend off, that Labor Day weekend off. So they'll be back that Monday on Labor Day. And then you're into a game week. Like, Lance, we're right on it. Like, this is, Kevin will never admit this, but this is kind of, okay, we got to start getting ready for week one time now. And we're going to get to go out there and watch those practices this week, but then they're going to shut it down after this week. And it's going to be regular season mode, and it's coming fast. And I think the key point you were making there is Joe Flacco has had a chance now to get comfortable as QB1, and it's just going to continue to trend that way, whether Kevin officially names him the starter this week or not.
Well, I do love preseason. I always love preseason because of third and fourth quarter, and we laughed in Philly about that. But one of the things that I saw from the joint practices and what I've seen in the practices as a whole is, I was asked today, why the Browns seem more disciplined, and I've discussed with you, I don't think it's discipline all the time when they're jumping off sides. I think it's acclimation. And one of the things that the Browns have done a really good job of they were 3-14, and the definition of sanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, right? So as a coach, you say, we weren't very good last year. So they've been more physical. They've had more live periods. They've been more physical up front with their run game. They did it today after big plays. Sometimes Kevin will get a big pass play and then keep going with the pass game. They went right back to that power run. So I just think they're creating an identity. They're giving themselves the best chance to win. And if you think about operation, last year, this offense right now, after the second scrimmage, people talk about motion and the things they wanted to do. They could barely get a snap off last year. It was really, really poor. So they're way ahead in terms of operation and their ability to be a competent offense. And a competent offense sometimes is taking the ball from your 10, moving it to the 40, getting stalled and punting it to the other 10 and making that team go 90 against this really elite defense, which I have said for weeks, and I will stand on that ground. I think it's a top 5 defense, and they're not doing anything right now to kind of change my thought on that just because of the way they run around.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that defense because it's gonna be really important. Because to your point, again, the offense we saw today, really nice opening drive, right? It is really hard in the NFL to have a lot of drives like that. You do need to be explosive. You do need to be able to push the ball down the field. And I don't know how much of that is in this offense, but if they can just play complementary football, if they can just protect the football, and again, I don't know if Joe Flacco checks all these boxes. He turns the ball over a ton too. But if they can protect the football, if they can run the football, control the clock a little bit, you let their defense work, not turn the ball over and put this defense on short fields, which absolutely killed them last year. I mean, it was jarring today to watch Dorian Thompson-Robinson play for the Eagles. And we've seen it. We've seen what he looked like regular season DTR today, not like preseason DTR. And it was just a reminder, like, to me, I kind of watched that and I thought, if nothing else, there's at least a baseline of competence in this quarterback room. I think at points this season, you're going to be able to put any of these guys out there and you're going to be able to run some semblance of an offense, which by the time we got to last year in December when they switched to DTR, like it was hopeless. And I don't think there's going to be that hopelessness this year.
Well, I on my notes today, I kept marking down balance plays. And once again, balance to me is not 50-50 run pass. Balance is when you win on first down. And I was before the pod started and you and I were talking, I thought it was great because that's where Kevin kind of gets pass happy sometimes. And I appreciate that because passing's fun. And I love calling plays and throwing big plays and things like that. But after big plays, after those third downs, Kevin came back with a basic power or basic wide zone. And that's creating that identity. That's also protecting the quarterback. And I have in my notes a number of times, and I can't wait to go back and watch this film 2 or 3 times a night in terms of when they were second and medium. And I know I've talked with you a lot about if you're 2nd and 5, now you're balanced. Because a lot of times when Shador Sanders or Dylan Gabriel, what's going to really help them is being 2nd and 5 and seeing a base defense and not seeing an exotic front and not seeing exotic roll coverages and things like that because you've won on first down and that defense has to be balanced. That's what I saw today. I saw them win on first down a bunch, which allows your quarterback play to be really good because now you're in charge and you dictate what the defense does, unlike what Schwartz does on the other side of the ball where he's going to dictate what you do. So I thought that was impressive as well. Because they won on first down, which I think is one of the keys this year for them having success. Being 2nd and 5, they got a chance to win some games.
You would be so proud of me because I'm sitting there watching that first quarter, and that's all I could think of. Like I'd look at that down and distance, and I'd be like, "Oh, Lance has got to be loving this. This is right in Lance's wheel. Like these downs and distances." And again, that's why you were converting those third downs so often. You were putting yourself in positions to where you didn't have to convert a bunch of 3rd and 12s, 3rd and 8s. Like you were in a position where you could kind of do whatever. I mean, they converted a third down on the ground, right? Like when you're able to put yourself in those positions, it helps a ton. And it's also worth noting today, they only had one starter on the offensive line. We can talk a little bit about that too, having DeJuan Jones out there in this game on a day when very few starters played, especially on offense. DeJuan Jones and Cedric Tillman both played in this game, which I found pretty interesting. I think I saw you tweeted that you loved that DeJuan Jones was out there. I found it very interesting that DeJuan played a lot in this game and also that Cedric Tillman played a lot in this game.
Well, once again, I think opportunity is huge for DeJuan Jones. And being that left tackle, he's an athlete. And obviously, everybody talks about his size, but DeJuan Jones is an elite athlete with his feet. He's a former basketball player. And I remember when I was coaching in high school, you always try to get those big kids out who could move their feet, maybe play the below the rim in basketball, but they're such good athletes. And those are the kind of guys, the tight ends who turn into the tackles. DeJuan Jones, who is a basketball player, and all of a sudden he's 300 pounds and he's got great feet, light feet for a big kid. This is the idea of playing left tackle. I don't think it hurts him at all kick stepping and working those footwork from the right to the left side. Now he can do it because he's an elite athlete. But once again, for me, the camp vibe has kind of been like these aren't like DeJuan Jones when he was out there. That his body language said to me, "I'm getting more work. I'm not being punished." Or sometimes we see that in the past. And same with Seth Tillman. Like if you're not comfortable with where you're at, or you think you're sliding on the depth chart, standing on the sideline is not going to help you. And if you have trouble kick stepping out to a 5 technique end, or you're having, the only way you get better is live action. So I thought that was great. I think it's great for his conditioning. I think it's great, just more reps with the footwork from the right to the left side. I thought that was a kind of shows where the Browns are at in terms of we're going to get these guys up to speed. And I appreciate that because they're whether everybody knows it or not, the things I'm watching, they're pushing to beat Cincinnati week 1. This is not to hang on. They're looking to win week 1. So I thought that was great. And same with Seth Tillman. Get him out there. He's got to get work. He's got to get the reps because he hasn't produced like they want him to produce yet.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that Cincinnati game a lot here over the next few weeks. But that is a slow starting team. We know that. They always start slow. Trey Hendrickson isn't signed yet. And so they're counting a lot on Shamar Stewart, who took him a while to get into camp. That defense is shaky. We've seen what the Browns pass rush has done to Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Like we know that's even though the Bengals have gotten the better of the Browns, I think 4 of the last 5 times, it hasn't been easy. Like we know that's a football team that sometimes struggles against the Cleveland Browns. So that certainly represents an opportunity before you have to go to Baltimore in week 2, not to play the whole schedule game here, but before you have to go to Baltimore in week 2, which is a much less winnable football game. That's a winnable game week 1 against the Bengals if this defense is as good as they've looked this week.
Well, yeah, and Zach Taylor's a guy like, I always tell people what's the number one thing going into the Bengals game. It has been the last 3 years when you and I have talked twice a year with the Bengals. Zach Taylor likes to get 5 out. That means he doesn't like to help very much on Miles. That's a problem for the Cincinnati Bengals, and Miles has kind of made him pay for that. Now, compared to what Miles has had, this is the best defensive front Miles has had, not only with his starters with him, but as a whole. And now they're doing lots of really good things with Alex Wright down to 3 technique. They're doing lots of things with Schlesinger and Bush, bringing 5 and 6 man pressures. They're covering that center, which is creating one-on-one matchups. So not only do they struggle, it's I've heard you, Mary Kay, and Ashley talk about sometimes defenses are just a bad fit. This is a bad fit for Cincinnati because Browns can rush the passer, Browns can cover in the secondary. Will they shorten the game? Bengals aren't great against the run. So there's a lot of things that make this a pretty favorable matchup. Not that they'll win it because you're going against one of the best, but this is a matchup in terms of schematically that you have the advantage because of your elite players and what the other team likes to do.
I am going to say this though, and I want to talk about that D line because they had such a great week, including today. I will say I am a little concerned about this secondary after Denzel Ward. I think Denzel Ward is setting up to have like maybe his best year. He's had an incredible summer. He was incredible this week in the joint practices. Nobody talks about Denzel. We've heard some Browns defenders kind of say this. Nobody talks about Denzel as that top five corner or whatever, but he's that good. I'm a little worried after him. I think Greg Newsome can probably hold his own on the outside. He's struggled with injuries. We saw Cam Mitchell get beat today for a touchdown. Miles Harden is a guy that's kind of in the running over there. I don't want to see Tony Brown playing a lot on the outside. I worry a little bit about that's the one thing in that matchup that I worry about. You can put Denzel on Jamar Chase. That's a great matchup. I want to see that. I want to see him shadow Jamar for 60 snaps. But I do worry about this Browns secondary. And this week just didn't make me feel better about it. Outside of Denzel.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. He was outstanding against Devontae Smith and those guys this week. One-on-ones, the whole, 7-on-7s, everything that we watched for a couple of days. But I will say this is a classic example of what Schwartz's defense can do, right? So if you think about it, right, that is their weakness. For me, it's the safety too. That safety's got to be a guy who can tackle and create some turnovers that, opposite Delpit. But if the Browns can win on first down, now all of a sudden the weakness of the secondary goes away just a little bit. And what I mean by that is that if you're 2nd and 4, then all the routes at all the levels are available, right? Hitches, slants, quick screens, things that Jamar Chase does very, very well when he gets the ball in his hands. If you think about, we're just going to use Chase as an example, Higgins, all those guys. But if you can win on first down, and now those routes need to be extended downfield a little bit, and the drop of the quarterback needs to go from 3 to 5, or maybe 5 to 7, or you have to run play action, and you have to set different launch points because of the pressure. The more that you can win on first down, and the more that offense needs to stretch the ball down the field, and Burrow needs to stretch it down the field, the more you can win with that pass rush. So it doesn't mean they're automatically going to win, but if they can get into more 2nd, 3rd long situations and force those routes to be 12 breaking routes and not hitches and, corner routes and things that are, can cause big plays, but also make the quarterback hold it more than 2.8. And with Myles Garrett, there was a 9-play thing. It was laughable against a really good tackle against the Eagles. It was laughable for about 10 plays. He would have had literally 8 to 10 sacks in a row. Now, obviously, they're going to chip, but that's not what Cincinnati likes to do. Taylor likes to get 5 out. So it's an interesting matchup. That front 7 is going to have to help that secondary with pressure and stopping the run on first down.
Yeah, I think that is an important, look, if the Eagles were game planning for the Browns, they would have had help against Miles. They would have figured out a way to try to neutralize Denzel Ward a little bit. But those guys are still, you're talking Miles, probably the best edge rusher in football. And Denzel, there's a case. He's up there. He's in the discussion for best corner in the game, I think. So you got 2 guys who are best or top 2 or 3 at their position already on this defense. So let's talk about the rest of that line because, again, the joint practices, they were awesome. Today, I felt a little bad for old Shelby Harris. Shelby Harris, Lance, has a daughter who's going to play college softball this year. Okay. and he's out there playing in the second quarter of a preseason game after joint practices. I felt a little bad for him. He's going to be a valuable depth piece, though. I think in that defensive tackle room, he's a good player. This front today, what these guys did today, you know, Isaiah McGuire and Alex Wright were out there. You expect one of those two guys to be a starter. You want to see them dominate going against Eagles backups, and they did that. Isaiah McGuire had a sack today. You know, you want to see some guys in your defensive tackle room who are expected to play in real football games. You want to see them have nice games. Shelby Harris had a good game. Sam Kamara, kind of a bubble guy, depending on what's going on with Mike Hall, but he's been good. I mean, this defensive line has so much depth. You know, Cam Thomas, Akora. I don't know if Joe Tryon-Shoyinka is a lock to make this roster. He probably is close just because they signed him, and I'm looking at when he's playing, so he's probably going to make it. But these guys behind him are really pushing, and we know that Jim Schwartz will make entire line changes in the middle of a drive. So if they've got 10 D linemen on this roster and 8 up on game day, all 8 of those guys are going to play and have a chance to make an impact. And there's a chance there's just a ton of depth on this defensive line.
Well, you know, when you went out and got Tryon-Shoyinka, you're like, he's for sure going to make the team. But Cam Thomas has been really impressive for me. And Cam Thomas fits. So now let's take a look at the starting lineup, right? So you got, it's either going to be Wright or McGuire at the end. Then you got Miles, you got Mason, and you got Malik Collins. It's really hard to explain to people how much Malik Collins is a complete menace inside. He is a pass rush pressure guy. And then Mason Graham is a guy. Obviously, well, I was talking about PFF earlier. Mason Graham is not a PFF guy. What I mean by that is he's an offensive coordinator's worst kind of nightmare because he's going to throw off double teams. He's constantly pinballing around in there. And then Malik Collins is a pass rush pro in terms of pressure. And the Browns are doing a really good job of walking both their backers into A gap, double mug, they call it, where they're showing 6 people, which is creating one-on-one matches for all those defensive linemen. Sometimes they bring 5, sometimes they bring 6, sometimes they bring 4. But now with the movement skills of all these guys, now they're twisting. You're getting TE stunts and TT stunts, and they're getting 5-man pressures. Malik is crossing the nose, and they're able to move and slant and angle, and there's so much depth. And then all of a sudden you go against the Ravens, right? Week 2, and you start the game plan. Well, then Juwan Briggs and Holly, are those guys going to make the team? Because I've watched those guys. I purposely watched nothing but the defensive line that second day at the Eagles. And those guys they're not pass rushing guys, but if you're struggling to stop the run, both of those guys are tanks, and they have tree trunk legs, and they don't get moved very much. So now you have some position flex. You're saying you can go against teams that run the ball. You can get a little bit bigger in there if you need to. So they have so much flexibility and depth and athleticism. And it tells you when they went out and got Malik Collins. Now Schwartz has 8 to 10 guys that fit his mold. They can play 3 and 5. They can play inside and out. They can twist. They stop the run, and they pass rush to stop the run. And that group will keep them in a lot of games this year single-handedly.
And I think the other, like when I think about this defensive line, and you look at the early part of the schedule, Cincinnati, right? Great offensive team that you're going to have to slow down. Green Bay is a really good offensive team, and great scheme, a little bit like Kevin Stefanski's scheme there. Kind of the same tree. They come from the same tree in a lot of ways. That's a good offensive football team. Detroit is a monster on offense, right? And the great equalizer in football is pressure, right? If you can create pressure, and that's a pain against some of these teams. Detroit's got a great O-line, for example. But, they're going to play Kevin O'Connell, who's a really great offensive mind. If you can create pressure, it's the way that you can destroy game plans. Now, are the Browns going to be able to do that for 4 quarters against those teams? Is it going to be enough for them to get off to a 500 start or whatever? I don't know. I've said it before. I'm not super confident in this team, but if they can consistently create pressure, and Mason Graham has been fantastic. Somebody was asking me, one of our texters asked me, hey, I haven't heard much about Mason Graham. How's he looked? And I think he's been the best draft pick in camp, if we're being honest. And, Schlesinger's been good. Fannon's been good. I think Graham's been the best. This is another win for you, Lance. I think Mason Graham has been the best draft pick in camp.
I like what you're saying there. Keep it going.
So the potential is there for this team to just be an absolute pain up front. And if you're a pain up front, That's how you destroy game plans in this league.
Well, yeah, you know what? And here's the thing too, because they have more guys who can win one-on-one matchups in the pass rush game. What I've seen in camp is they walk those two linebackers up. Well, you can't walk those two linebackers up unless those linebackers are athletic enough to get back when they need to, right? Back into coverage and back into their reads in the run game. Schlesinger, Bush, Baker, these guys are all now fit the mold too of this scheme where they can run. And one of the best things they do is run and hit. So you're going to see a ton of where the Browns are going to show 6 guys on the line of scrimmage, whether it's inside or outside. And remember, when those guys walk up to the line of scrimmage, I tell everybody, once you're on the line of scrimmage, the offensive line has to assume you're coming. So I look for the Browns to show 6 all year, and they're going to bring 4, 5, or 6, but that's how they're going to create those one-on-one matchups. And now they have 4 guys, especially in passing downs, that can win. You're going to see Malik Collins. If you leave him one-on-one, he's going to have a huge year with not only sacks but pressures. He's elite in his B rush pass rush move. So I'm with you. It's easy to draw stuff up, but if you got guys in the backfield 3 yards, it's a pain in the butt, and you can't call plays. Which unfortunately I've had a number of time in my career where things didn't go so well because the defensive line dominated.
Well, and the winning the one-on-one matchups is like, right. That's how Myles Garrett goes from, look, the Myles Garrett's amazing to watch, and the joy of Myles Garrett has been just his consistency, right? Like every year, just write it in pen, he's going to have 14 sacks. He's every year 12 to 14 sacks. One of these years, I'm convinced, like as great as he's been, there's still that one season when we go back and look at that Pro Football Reference page, it's going to be like, oh my God, can you believe the year Myles Garrett had in 2025? Like Aaron Donald has 1 or 2 of those. JJ Watt had 1 or 2 of those, right? So the consistency has been there for Myles. But if he's got 3 guys, and that other end position is still very much up in the air, but if he's got 3 guys that can each win one-on-one matchups, all of a sudden that makes life so much harder, because now maybe you can't bring 3 or 4 guys over to Myles Garrett's side. You might not have a situation like we had a few years ago where the tight end was just following Myles Garrett everywhere he went pre-snap. Now you're freeing up Myles Garrett to go make plays. And that's how we get to one of those years where it's like we're 10 years from now, we're thinking back to 2025, and it's like, oh my God, do you remember that year Myles Garrett had 20 sacks and forced 4 fumbles and scored a touchdown? Like that's when Myles Garrett has that, like, that year you'll just never forget with him.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is my 4th year of being down there every single day and trying to like build on what you see from previous years and fronts and coverages. And 2 things stand out to me. First of all, obviously Myles is, as Meliad was saying, he's different. He's one of one, and we all know that. But the thing that I've noticed with all these guys is both sides of the ball. First of all, Myles is having as good a camp as he's had in my 4 years of watching him in terms of one-on-one reps, being out there a bunch, being physical in the run game. He's kind of part of the crew now. He's not an extra. Sometimes, those superstars, they don't have to do everything. He's been right in the mix. Second, these guys look really fit this year. I don't know what it is. Both the offense and defensive line, obviously, their body types that they got both inside and outside. But these guys on both sides of the ball, everybody looks really fit. They made a concerted effort to get in great shape this year, which is only going to help them. And like I said, when you're covering those linebackers walk up and you're a team that likes to get 5 out and you're saying, we're going to try to slide our center or slide somebody to Myles, there's a lot of other winnable one-on-one matchups with not just 3. They got 4, 5, 6 guys that can win some matchups. So it'll be very interesting. That team, that position group could carry this group early if they're going to get some wins early.
I liked this comment here. And this is something we talked about, just to go back to the quarterbacks real quick. Even though they're young, I feel better about this QB room than last year. I know it's a mess, but at least I think the Browns will get average play. And again, that kind of goes back to the point we were talking about this time a year ago. I mean, we were still trying to figure out what it was going to look like with Deshaun Watson, and obviously that turned into a disaster. They were still trying to figure out the offense and how that was going to look with Ken Dorsey. That didn't work. Jameis was good when he got his opportunity, but you know who Jameis is, right? He's gonna throw for 450, but also throw 2 pick sixes in a game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then of course we talked about the DTR side of it. It just goes back to, if at the very least, even if there isn't a franchise quarterback in that room, if they just know what they're going to get from the quarterback position every week, they can actually build an offense around it. They can actually build something usable on Sundays around it, and they can come up with counters and they can make adjustments, and they like just having competent quarterback play, which it seems like they're going to have. Again, we'll see. Um, it seems like that just gives you a chance.
Well, and competent quarterback play gives you an identity, right? So even, talk about operation, right? And I talked about earlier, like those big passes Dylan Gabriel threw on first down. I immediately, my third down, my immediate thought was, what is Kevin going to run on first down now? They just hit a big play. The quarterback is rolling. Sometimes that's quarterbacks get excited, right? They get hot. They're like, and then they make poor decisions. That's also helping your quarterback, right? Big third down completion. Come back, run the ball. Second and 6. Now you're back in the driver's seat, second and 6. And if they can get competent quarterback play with that defense, and competent quarterback play is, for me, is a quarterback you win with, not quarterback you win because of. And that might be getting him into the right run game. That might be making sure you manipulate the clock right. That might be third down and 8 inside your own 50, you throw it away and you punt. There's a lot of things besides just completions that make competent quarterback play. And both those rookies the last 2 weeks have been more than competent in terms of just the operation and getting and looking and being complimentary, right? You just said it's hard for a defense to, it's hard to go 90 yards against the Browns defense consistently, but it's not hard to go 40 yards. And if they can just not make sure they protect the ball and be competent, the Browns will be in a lot of games with that defense.
Right. And that idea of a quarterback you can win with versus quarterback you can win because of, right? Obviously, ultimately, you want the second one, the quarterback you win because of, right? But if you don't have that guy, or you haven't discovered if one of these guys is that guy yet, I mean, what are you supposed to like? It's of course everybody wants a Mahomes, right? Everybody wants Josh Allen. Everybody wishes they could have been the team that drafted Jaden Daniels. But if you don't have one of those guys, what are you supposed to do? Just throw up your hands and say, "All right, we'll see you next year." Like, no, you got to figure it out. You got to figure out how to win games. And if you have guys that can protect the football, can run your offense, you would like a little explosiveness, then again, you're giving yourself a chance on Sundays. And maybe that guy you can win because of is in next year's draft. I don't think any of these guys in that draft have even if Arch Manning comes out, which I don't think is going to happen. None of those guys have shown they're that guy yet. They're going to get a year to do it here. But again, you can't just throw your hands up and be like, well, we'll see you next year and hope that maybe cross our fingers we get Patrick Mahomes somehow.
Well, and I'll be, and once again, I'm a lifelong learner in the game of football. And what I learned when I was an early offensive coordinator is that you have what you do and you have what you know. And the great thing about Kevin Stefanski's offense is that sometimes an offensive coordinator, he only can be successful if he has a guy, he can, win because of. And I think Kevin Stefanski does a great job of maximizing the floor with some of the guys, that he has success with, right? He's going to take these guys, he's going to maximize their skill set. And that's not always great because, as you know, Dan, I'm a players over plays guy. But if you don't have those players, you better schematically be very good. And there's not a better play designer in the red zone. There's not a better play designer with getting to levels and some of these easy quarterback friendly concepts that Kevin run. He does a fantastic job of that. And that's why their quarterbacks are ready to play. And you can win a Super Bowl with a quarterback you can win with if every other thing is really good. The run game, the defense. Do you have a guy? Is Jerry Jeudy, if you're going to run the ball and take one receiver shot plays, can Jerry Jeudy make those plays? So we'll see all that as the season goes along. But the formula is there for them to be highly competitive in every game. And I'd be shocked if they're not, just because that defense is going to keep them in a lot of games.
Yeah, look, I worry about attrition a little bit. Are they good? Once you start to get in that depth, I think they're going to run into some issues. Again, I'm not predicting some great record for this football team, but I do think they have a chance to just be a pain every single Sunday, and that's going to win you some games too. Somebody wanted us to talk about the offensive line. I do just want to mention that outside of DeJuan Jones today, it was Tevin Jenkins. This is the starting group: Tevin Jenkins at left guard, Luke Whippler at center. Zinter at right guard, and then I got to actually pull up the Browns roster here. It was Jackson Barton at right tackle. So this was very much the second offensive line group outside of DeJuan Jones. So I wouldn't read too much into it. I do worry a little bit about Zinter. I worry a little bit about Whippler if for some reason they have to rely on one of those two guys. But I don't think there's any reason to not feel good about this starting offense. We'll see about DeJuan Jones on the left side, but this starting offensive line, if they're healthy, I don't know if they're going to be the group they were a few years ago when they were one of the best O-lines in football, but that's a pretty good group, especially if this is going to look more like what Kevin Stefanski likes to do.
Yeah, I think you're right. The depth is an issue. Lucas has struggled with some pass protection. Jenkins has struggled at the guard with some speed rushers in that wide 3 gap. Whippler did a great job. I thought it was his best block on the touchdown, the first touchdown run. Whippler did a great job of getting to that second level linebacker, which being not a huge guy, that's something he's really got to do on that zone scheme. That was a wide zone scheme. But the thing that, I've been asked, like, what schemes are they running this year? Well, Kevin Stefanski is a wide zone. He is an inside zone guy. He's a gap guy. He'll take advantage of what, if they were facing the Browns, it'd be more gap schemes because the Browns are so much upfield. If he's facing a 2-gap team, it's more zone where you're going to get those big double teams. But the consistency that you're getting from the Browns this year, regardless of scheme, is you're getting double teams. So you're getting the double team with the center and the guard, which is called an ace, and the guard and the tackle, which is called a deuce. And then once in a while between tackle and tight end, which is a tray. But the big thing is they're just trying to create an attitude and an identity. And all those runs, everybody talks to the, complexity of all the runs. It's really just, we're going to take 2 guys and we're going to vertically move a guy back. And that's the foundation of Kevin's offense in that run game. Then that creates the lanes for those backs. And you saw that today on the touchdown run where Marshall started to the right and cut it back because Whippler got to the second level. So that's what you're seeing. You're seeing the double teams, the physicality, and the sticking to it, even when you're getting some big plays, which is really, really exciting. And I know the defense is very excited about that as well.
Well, and look, the other part of this, and this is going to happen soon, probably in the next couple of days, they got to get Quinshon Judkins back on the field, get him signed, get him on the field, get him ramped up. I don't know how long that's going to take. I don't know if he's going to face a suspension. Obviously, for those who haven't been paying attention, there were no charges filed. They decided not to file charges in his domestic violence case on, I believe that news came out Thursday. So Quinshon's going to sign. He's going to be a part of this team. I don't know how long it's going to take for him to take over as the featured back. I don't know if he's going to face a suspension or not, but they need to get him on the field too, because it's just, I think Jerome Ford is fine as a placeholder there. I don't know that I want Dylan Sampson to be that featured back. I'd rather them kind of keep him in that third down role and go with Jerome Ford until Judkins is ready, but they need to get him on the field to kind of see what he looks like too. To really kind of figure out what this run game is going to look like.
Well, it's going to be interesting because I for a while, I've always thought of Jerome Ford as a third down back, but I think he's a complementary back to Judkins. And then Sampson, who's a little smaller than I thought, just the wear and tear. But he also catches the ball well, and he's really position flexible. I've been very impressed with Jerome Ford over the last 2 years of not being all or nothing, right? So for his first 2 years, it was second 10 or home run. Right, he was getting 0 or 60, and he's doing a little better job. He's a much thicker this year, and he would be, I think, a great complement to Judkins just because he would be a fresh body and he runs really vertically, really hard. And then you can get Sampson in that role of the third down back, split out when they like to go empty in 13. And then I'm big on Marshall because I think Marshall's a guy who can really help them in the red zone. And I think Marshall's going to push Pierre Strong for that last spot, depending on how many receivers and, all that stuff that I'll be following your lead on. But that's kind of what you're going to see where they're going to go with that run game, depending on how many tight ends they keep, receivers and backs. So, Judkins is back because Judkins, again, I will tell you consistently throughout the year, he really it gets you to second 5, which can really make this offense be pretty productive this fall.
One of the fun things to watch this year is going to be the Judkins versus Travion Henderson, who's off to a really nice start in New England.
Yeah.
I think they're going to both be good pros. I'm just curious to see which one ends up being. I don't think this is going to be a Sony Michel, Nick Chubb situation, which obviously the Browns been. I think they're both going to be good backs. I'm just curious to see how they both end up looking at the NFL level. But Judkins, the Browns need that physicality. They need that workhorse. They need that ability. And I'm with you on Ford. I think he's gotten better. Mm-hmm. And I think he's gotten more patient. And sometimes you see him make a run and it's like, okay, I liked that.
Yeah.
He's not as boom or bust as he used to be. But if you got Judkins, if you got Sampson, if you have Ford sort of as your change of pace guy who can maybe hit a big play every now and again, you've got a really nice kind of group. And I always talk about receivers, how you want that receiver room to look like a basketball team, all different shapes and sizes and different positions. You got some different running backs too that you can kind of put in there behind Jerome Ford, behind Quinshon Judkins. And I agree with you with Amani Marshall. He runs hard. Like, he's a big dude and he runs hard.
Yeah, and he gives you pass protection and he gives you red zone. And, like I always think about like middle of third quarter, he hasn't played a ton. He keeps himself fresh to their pros. And all of a sudden that defense is worn down a little bit. Junkins maybe has a couple big runs and he's tired. You can sneak him in there at 200, 25, 30 pounds and, run power just to get a couple, get that big, heavy, fresh body in there. And sometimes that's so important on third down and in the red zone. But yeah, I think the pieces, parts, and then, if Ford is in his role as a complimentary guy and not as a bell cow, I think he becomes much more productive because he does have that home run ability and he can catch the ball, and all these guys can catch the ball. So you're going to see 12 personnel with those guys in the slot as well because they all do a great job at receiver.
Okay, real quick then, let's talk about this receiver room. So Jerry Jeudy, obviously, said Tillman, obviously. Jamari Thrash has had a really nice camp, couple drops here and there, but he's been much better. So he's in. Who am I forgetting? So then you get to like Deontay Johnson, Caden Davis, this next group, Larvadan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to check the roster too to make sure I'm not forgetting somebody obvious here, but it's getting harder, I think, to make that case that Deontay Johnson got off to a good start in this camp, but he had a bad week this week, and he didn't do a lot today. And it's hard for me to sit here and make the case that you got to put Deontay Johnson on this roster ahead of Caden Davis if it comes down to a decision like that, because Caden Davis is a guy that they liked to begin with. I know they like his speed. I know they like kind of what he brings to the table, but DeAndre Carter. That's the name I was forgetting. Which people might be like, wait, DeAndre Carter, really? But I think he's going to be their primary kick returner, and they're going to get him the ball in some different ways. So if we're going Jeudy, Tillman, Thrash, and DeAndre Carter as locks as the four guys, and I'm looking at the roster to make sure I don't forget anybody. If they keep 6, it makes it a little easier. I don't know if they'll keep 6. It becomes an interesting discussion between a Deontay Johnson and a Caden Davis and a Gage Larvadan. It's getting hard to make that case for Deontay Johnson, other than, he kind of is a guy that moves a little different, looks a little different, but at some point you got to produce.
Well, you're right. In early, I would say, days 6 to 8, we were standing there going, oh, okay, he's really good. And they're the skill.
He had a good week before they went to Carolina, right? Yeah. And then they go to Carolina, and I wasn't in Carolina to see that practice, so I don't know about that one. But then this week, I thought it was a step back.
Yeah, and the thing that's frustrating is, why is it a step back? Because his skill set is elite, and you see that when he's running individual drills. You see that in 7-on-7. You see that even in team. You see the things that he can do at all 3 levels, right? The release versus man in zone, the catch point, and then the run after catch. He would give them an outstanding slot, even though he's been primarily outside. He has slot. He can do some things in the slot. And you saw with Jamari Thrash. You can be really creative in the slot and get some matchups that you can win, that I think Deontay Johnson can be very good. But however, you got to produce. And whatever that reason he didn't produce the last couple of days is something they need to figure out, because when you watch him at practice every day, there's no doubt he's the number 2 talent guy on that roster, in my opinion, in terms of just the physical ability to get open. Jerry Jeudy's first. But when you're talking about an NFL receiver who can catch and wiggle and sudden and twitchy and get big yards and make one-handed catches, it's Deontay Johnson. But the consistency's not there, so that's going to have to change. Or they're going to be in 12, right? And Fannin has proven that he can do some of those things as well.
Yeah, Fannin did have a good week, especially on Thursday. And I love that he had a drop like on the second throw of the day, or maybe it was the first throw of the day on Thursday. He dropped it. And then he just went on to have a really good day. So I love seeing that out of him. But yeah, I mean, like if you're Deontay Johnson and this is kind of your last chance, and the Browns were the only team that called you this offseason, you can't have plays like you did on Thursday on that 2-pointer where it goes off his chest and it gets intercepted. Like the leash just isn't as long for him, even though, like you said, if we're ranking just the raw talent of these guys, he's probably number 2.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So one of the things that I've noticed about the all camp, and then especially on Wednesday early, the Browns are moving, right? And everybody thought they were going to do that with Dorsey. So all these guys have to be productive because it's a system, right? They're not Cooper Kupp. And you and I were talking about like, we're throwing it to Cooper Kupp in the last drive, figure it out. We're going to get him the ball. This is a system based offense. And now with Tommy Rees, I've told everybody their movement, they're creating these great windows with their motion, the orbit motion, the rewind motion, you name it, they are shifting and moving. And what it's doing is creating these great windows. But now we saw 8 to 10 drops over the course of 2 days, with the second day only being about an hour. So the Browns got to make sure they're catching the football and make sure to do those things. And Deontay Johnson, he's got to prove that he matches, that the production matches the talent. Because when you watch his talent, you're like, how does this guy not just dominate? And in some days he's just not there. He's not out there.
Yeah, and then obviously he's had seasons where he's been great, but it's all the other stuff. The reason he was with a bunch of teams last year, again, the reason only one team called him this year, the leash just is not going to be very long, unfortunately for him. So he's got to have a good week this week, because, like we said, this is kind of the make your case week. You know, they're going to go into this dress rehearsal game. They're going to have these 3 practices this week. It's going to feel like a normal football week. And then it's cut down day. They cut this roster next Tuesday. So the Tuesday after the preseason game. And then it's, to quote Bill Belichick, we're on to Cincinnati. So this is it for a lot of these guys. It's now or never for some of them. Okay. Anything else, Lance? I always like to just make sure that we covered. I know you've got a ton of notes. I know you're going to go back and watch the fourth quarter of this game 10 times between now and Sunday morning, as well as the rest of the quarters. But anything else you want to point out here before we wrap this thing up?
Well, I would say this, being out in Philly and kind of going over the thing that I saw, a couple of notes that I took was, first of all, I love the movement on offense. I think that's going to really help the quarterbacks. More than the offense as a whole, schematically, I thought they matched the physicality of the Eagles. There's a sense of pace. There's a sense of urgency. There's a sense of like desperateness that I saw that you should have as a football team. Myles Garrett is better than he's been. It sounds kind of weird to say that, but I think he's, in my 4 years of watching him every day, he's better than he's been. And I think it's because that defensive line has more parts to it. I think you're right about the secondary. You're worried about the corners. For me, I would say the safety, that one high safety, is what I really need to see moving forward. And can that guy tackle and make some turnovers? The offensive line, Zach Zinter is getting his feet back a little bit. I was really worried about his lateral movement. I thought he did a pretty good job just with movement. He's not blocking everybody yet, but his movement skills coming off that severe leg injury seemed really better. And the Browns are double teaming, and the Browns are moving people, and the Browns are sticking with the run. And, obviously there's some answers at receiver, but I would say as a whole, as the Browns fans start getting ready, there's a sense of urgency about this team. Doesn't always carry over into wins, but I will say there's a much bigger sense of urgency of really trying to get this right and doing the right things on both sides of the ball that give them the best chance to win. That's what I noticed. I thought they competed their butts off out in Philly. It was hot. It was irritated. I absolutely loved sitting in those bleachers. We were sweating. It was miserable. That to me is what football is, and that's when you get better. Those days that are just miserable out there, and that's those days we were sitting in those bleachers, as you know. I mean, it's hot, and I thought they competed and didn't take a back seat to Philadelphia at all, and I think that's a good sign.
I sweated through like 4 shirts. I ran out of clothes. I sweated through so many shirts in those practices. I will say, I know it was fun. I thought the trick plays were a little weird. That felt to me like a team that was trying to win a joint practice against a team that was coming off a Super Bowl win. But to their credit, I thought they competed really well in those 2 days, and that should make people feel good. And I think the vibes are really good too. By the way, I just think the vibes around this team are really good.
And it's funny you say that vibes are so important, and that vibes just helps you when you go through these hard practices. And I will say one thing about a trick play. Trick plays, there's no such thing as a trick play, Dan. They're only plays that you practice. A trick play would be something you don't practice. This is what I used to tell my dad, but don't run the trick play. If you practice a play, it's no longer a trick play. It's just in your offense. So just going to throw that out there to you.
One quick question I just want to get to. Do we think they will announce Joe on Tuesday as the starter? If I were a betting man, I would say if they are going to make an announcement, we would probably get it on Tuesday. So Kevin has a Zoom call with local media on what is today, Saturday. So he has a Zoom on Sunday with us. I don't think he's going to make that announcement tomorrow on the Zoom. I think it's more likely he's going to wait until Tuesday at the earliest to make that announcement. At some point, he's going to announce. At some point, he's going to announce the starters for that Saturday game, and that's going to kind of give it away anyway, because I think they'll treat that like the dress rehearsal. But yeah, I think our guy in the comments there is on target with if he's going to make an announcement, I think it would more likely be Tuesday than tomorrow. But as people will readily tell me, I have been wrong a million times. So I guess.
Well, I will say that I will say this. I try to follow your guys' lead, and Kevin gives you a lot of the answers that are very similar to many questions that he gets. But I will say this: Flacco has separated himself so much. It wouldn't shock me at any point in time if he was named. Now, obviously, you got he has his way of doing things, and as a coach, I always appreciate that. But the separation for me now is the separation so much. I wouldn't be shocked if he named it today, tomorrow, Monday, whenever he would. But it wouldn't shock me. That's my point being. That's how much I think he separated himself from the other quarterbacks.
Okay, big week ahead. We will cover it all. If you are watching this on our YouTube channel, of course, this is the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. So go to Apple Podcasts, go to Spotify, wherever you listen. Go there and get subscribed to our podcast so that as soon as we hit publish, we do at least 5 pods a week. And when we get into the season, we're going to be doing a bunch, including we're going to be doing a little college football talk this year on the pod. Lance is involved in a few of our pods. So we have a lot of fun doing that podcast. So Orange and Brown Talk on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Now, if you're listening to this on the podcast and not watching live on YouTube, go find our YouTube channel. It's Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. So get subscribed to that. And then, of course, if you're not one of our Football Insider subscribers, go to cleveland.com/Browns. It's the blue banner at the top of the page there. We do texting. You get a newsletter every day, all sorts of good stuff for our Football Insider subscribers. Again, that blue banner at the top of the page of cleveland.com/Browns will get you where you need to go. All right, Lance, this was fun. I know you got to go rewatch this football game, so I'll let you go. Thanks for joining me, man.
Absolutely. As always, thanks for having me, my friend.
All right, we'll talk to everybody later. Thanks for watching.